Well, good morning and welcome. Welcome to our 9th meeting of our Summer Forum Speaker Series for 2017 here at the First Unitarian Church. Sorry to start about 5 minutes late. We'll make it up to you. Today, it's going to be creative. Okay. We're going to have 2, maybe 3 members of the Utah State House of Representatives speak to you today about ideology and lawmaking, the public process, talking about the Utah State Legislature, how they do their job, and prospects for 2018. Okay. Now, the member who's not yet here, who's beaming himself here from Riverton right now, is Republican Representative Dan McKay, who represents the 41st District, has been in the legislature since 2012, works closely with Speaker Hughes, and is a lawyer realtor. He'll talk to you about what he has done as the chief sponsor, I think, of about 22 bills in the last 5.5 years. Okay. Also with us, okay, are 2 members of the House of Representatives of the Democratic Party. We have Representative Patrice Arent, who represents District 36. And she first came to the legislature in 1996. She's also served in the Senate. She has been the chief sponsor of over 70 bills in over 2 decades, over 70 bills, has served on at least 13 standing committees and many task forces. She is a lawyer and also a law professor, adjunct law professor at the University of Utah. She is also married, the mother of 2 kids, and a proud grandmother. I can tell you that for sure. So, okay. Also, standing in for Representative McKay is Liz Waite, serving her first term in the state legislature, District 31, the northwest side of Salt Lake City, and a member of the Democratic Party. So what we're going to do is we're going to go presentations for approximately 10 minutes. We'll integrate Representative McKay when he arrives, and after speaking for approximately 10-15 minutes, we'll take a time out for 2 minutes or so to pass the plate, the offering, and the rest of the time to be questions and answers. Remember, with questions and answers, we want to be expeditious. I'll pass the mic back and forth. Signal to me, hand, nod, something, and we'll get right to the questions, and we'll go maybe to about 11:15 or so. Okay, so with that in mind, let's welcome our guests this morning.
Thank you so much. It is great to be here. Could you hear me? Is this working out okay? Wonderful. And thank you, Professor Chambliss. I appreciate the very kind introduction. I should say that 70 bills are the ones that passed. We all have bills that didn't pass, too. And it is very nice to be here, although I will say at a very sad moment after what happened yesterday in Charlottesville. Many of us, are connected with that area. It doesn't matter if you are or not. What happened was absolutely deplorable. The white supremacists, it's just the anti-Semitism. I am the co-president of the National Association of Jewish Legislators, and the things we have seen happen this year, beyond any time I can remember, absolutely appalling. And I don't have the right words to explain how I feel about this. It shouldn't happen in our country. It shouldn't happen anywhere in the world. We need to strongly, strongly condemn this. Just horrible. So now to talk about the Utah Legislature. Last night I ran into one of your congregants who mentioned that they like to leave town and be gone the entire time the legislature is meeting in January, February, and early March. And I said a couple of things. First of all, we meet out all year round, so you're just going to have to move completely because there are meetings, official meetings that go on with interim meetings, task force meetings, constituent meetings, every week of the year. If you come up to the legislature next week, you'll find all of us are in meetings. They're official meetings. You can get online, and I'm going to recommend our legislative website to get a lot of good information, which is le for legislature.utah, spelled out, .gov, le.utah.gov. That's where you get the same schedules and the same information that we get. But I also said to her, you know, when you're finding out what goes on up there, you're relying on the press like we all do, and the press tries to do such a good job. When I first started, there was the healthcare expert, the environmental expert, the expert on education, and there are all kinds of members of the press there. Now you'll have a situation where the Tribune might be lucky to have one or two people trying to cover everything one day, and the same thing for the other press. So it's very hard for them to do that. So they try and pick things that they think people will be excited about and are controversial. Even if they're not controversial, and make them controversial. But anyway, they really try hard to do their best, but you don't read about a lot of the just boring, good work that goes on. And there are good things that go on in a bipartisan way. I am the founder and co-chair of our Bipartisan Clean Air Caucus. We work together. Republicans, Democrats work together to try and improve our air quality. For some of us, it started out, it was a very significant, and is a very significant healthcare issue. For others, they see it as an economic development issue. They realize that there are businesses, employees that don't want to be in Utah, tourists that won't come here because of our air quality. And I hope we could talk more about air quality because it's also a summer problem too. So you often just don't hear about those bills, even though they're really good bills. Other times you just get strange headlines, and I will give you one example of kind of to help you understand the process. Came back, I was in the legislature for a decade, retired, found someone else to run for my seat, threw out the boxes, said I was never going to do it again, moved. 4 years later, last minute panic call from the party, we have no one to run in your district, and finally ends in 4 days, will you run in this district? So I ended up running in the Republican district. And I found out about an issue that I felt was very important, a bill that had not passed for years, prohibiting people from smoking in a car if a child is present. Very bad health impacts. You know, even if you roll down your windows within 5 minutes, it's toxic. So I'm working on this bill, and I have a lot of opposition from the right wing, from, you know, Gail Rizika, you know the crew, because we wouldn't want to tell people what to do in the privacy of their own cars, even though you got little kids who can't get up and leave when this is happening. And I work really hard, and to get it to the House floor after a lot of shenanigans went on, and we get a vote, and this is the first year with a huge new Republican class, and this is their first controversial vote, and they're looking at their leadership because they all press buttons, and you can see how people are voting to see how they vote, and every member of the House Republican leadership votes against this bill. But the bill passes. And then, because I've worked hard, I've talked to every member of the legislature, I get it to the Senate. Now, frankly, in most states, when you're in the minority, you wouldn't even have the bill heard in the first place, and certainly if it went to the Senate, that would be the end of it. I get it to the Senate, and I work really hard, and I get it to the Senate. I finally get it to the right committee as opposed to the committee they want to kill it. It's the health committee. Gee, it's a health issue. So I get it in there, and I work really hard, and it passes with only one negative vote. Next day, A1, above the fold, controversy rising on this bill. I'm like, really? I finally get a good vote, and that's what you're saying? So people, you know, the press isn't always what you want it to be. And it's not the person who has written the article that necessarily writes the headline. So, you know, that's what happens. So just know that you can't always trust everything you're reading. You're not reading everything that's going on up there. There are some great sources, both our legislative website and groups like the League of Women Voters who are up there. And it's important to kind of keep track of their resources and their information. For those of you who do not know who your legislators are, and it's amazing to me how many people don't know who represents them, it's really easy to find out. Again, go to our website, le.utah.gov, and just scroll to the bottom and plug in your address, and you will find out who represents you. And now is the time you should be contacting that person, not in January. Don't wait till then. Contact them now. Make sure they know who you are and what you care about. Now, what you may say to me is, I live in so-and-so's district, and they're a Democrat, and they agree with me, or they're a Republican, and they agree with me, and I don't need to contact them. They'll do what I want. But the reality is we're all asked to help support a lot of things, and there's only so much time and so much money to go around. So yes, I support the arts. Yes, I support the environment. Yes, I support education. Yes, I support healthcare. On and on and on. But if I don't hear from my constituents on certain issues, other ones will rise to the top just because I only have 24 hours in a day. And for example, nobody at the legislature has worked harder on healthcare than I have. on air quality than I have. I really care about cleaning up our air. And let me tell you, we've had horrible ozone problems in the summer. I haven't heard from my constituents. In the winter, air quality is bad. I hear only during the inversion. And unfortunately, we are not necessarily doing the budget when the inversion's still going on. The budget is done at the end. So please contact your legislators, and here's the trick. When you contact them, and maybe you happen to know a legislator who isn't even your legislator, you just know them from the bowling league or church or whatever, make sure you tell them how you know them, and if you live in their district, don't just say, I live in your district. Give them your home address. Because there are days, Liz, and all of our colleagues will get the same email, I am your constituent. They can't live in everybody's district, and I don't have the resources to respond to everybody. I try, but I always respond to my constituents first. You should know we have no personal staff. I don't have an assistant. I read all the email I get, and some days you can't even imagine how many hundreds or thousands of email messages come through if you're on a hot issue. We have a couple of full-time people that help us, really the equivalent of that, for the whole caucus. That's it. They do scheduling, they do all kinds of other things. So we are really on our own. We do have a bipartisan staff that helps with the drafting of the bills and the fiscal analysis, but we don't have this huge staff. So often people will email me and say, well, I'm emailing you and the governor and the senators and all of this stuff, and they get a response from some staff person. We don't have that staff person. In terms of just politics in general, I've been there for a while. I grew up under 20 straight years of Democratic governors. And I think politics works best when there's more balance. As Afton Bradshaw, of blessed memory, used to say, she was a Republican who represented a district near here, the moderate Republicans will have more of a voice when there are more Democrats. I just think when either political party has too much control, their extremists take over. And I'm so sad that I couldn't follow Dan McKay. He was going to speak first because he's really on the right wing, and it would have made me look good. But anyway, there are other things going on this year. Please, if you have an election and you have not turned in your ballot, it has to be postmarked tomorrow. Not stuck in the mail and had the postman not pick it. The letter carrier can't pick it up the next day. It has to be postmarked tomorrow. So please remember that. Remember also this year, there'll be an election in November, and there are a number of initiatives that are getting started. The medical marijuana one has already been approved, the language has been approved by the Lieutenant Governor's office. There will be one on redistricting, which I think is extremely important. They're all important. And one called Our Schools Now to help improve funding for education. So please watch for those. There may be others. It is not easy to get an initiative on the ballot. The legislature has made it a very difficult process, unfortunately. You have to have many signatures throughout the state, and there's a way to get them off, and it's a difficult process. So we want to make sure that if you are interested in these, they need people to go out and get signatures, pass them around among your neighbors, your church, whatever. They need help. All of them have websites, but these are very important, and I hope you will participate if you are interested in them. Anyway, I don't want to take any more time initially. I'm going to turn it over to Liz, who is an amazing new member of our caucus. We are thrilled to have her. Her constituents in West Valley love her, and I know she's a member of your congregation, and you know her well, but Liz is just an incredible asset to our caucus.
And I might say that Liz is also a really good sport right now, and I understand that Representative McKay will be here in about 10 minutes. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that introduction. And this is spur of the moment, but I'm really excited to get to address you as a legislator from this congregation because there hasn't been one for a while. I represent a district that reaches clear out to 7200 West. So it reaches across an area that is a distinctly different population from the one that Representative Arent represents. And of course, that's the whole idea with the representation in an elected process, that we represent the state of Utah, but we represent the distinct populations that elect us. The issues in my district are air, clean air, We have the Mountain View Corridor, and I don't know how many people actually know what that is. It's another predecessor for I-215 going through the west side, right through the middle of my district. And that's become a pretty huge issue out there because there is not a lot of mitigation planned for air quality. So that freeway is going through the backyards of schools that wouldn't have been allowed to build there if the highway had been there first. In my district, one of the biggest issues is that people they're not as involved, they're not as engaged. It's a very young district, lots of kids, lots of families, lower than median income. So there are often 3, 4, 5 jobs per household. And that's where the focus is keeping the income going, keeping the kids active in school, finding the schools. There are charter schools where people send their kids and don't really know what the charter schools are about, but they hear about them from the neighbors. So these are all the kinds of things that I'm reaching out to the people in my neighborhoods to help them understand and engage and understand that I'm a person to come to address the issues on the state level. I'm having what we're calling neighbor talks about every 2 or 3 weeks, and I go to parks in specific neighborhoods. I send out a whole bunch of postcards before I go so that people will know that availability is there. My constituents are more often than not, people who have been to the Capitol. They're not people who have been to the Capitol. They often don't know how to navigate around the state legislature, at the Capitol building or not. So that's my job, particularly as a new legislator, helping them get to know me and helping them get to know their state government and the issues that they can address and the invitation that they have, and actually even the urgency that is growing for them to meet their elected officials on the city and county and state level. So even though I'm on the state level, what we actually end up talking a lot about in the neighborhood talks are the city elections going on this year. In West Valley City, we'll elect a new mayor or re-elect the one who's there, 3 council people, and then there's the whole council situation where a lot of people don't understand why they're not seeing a primary election on the ballot they just received. Those are the kinds of things, that's the level of the conversation that I'm having in the neighbor talks. Then we get into talking about charter schools and the kinds of laws that they hear about in the media, but don't necessarily seem to affect them. So we're talking about that, and that's my purpose as a freshman legislator, to help people understand what their position is with their elected officials, as I was saying. In terms of my legislation, I ran into, and when I'm looking at the topic of ideology and lawmaking, I ran into that this year, because if we go to, as a new legislator, to the state legislature with really ingrained ideology that we want to jump right into and deal with, we meet the legislators who have a different ideology and are ready to, and skilled and experienced at coming at us from the other side. So as carefully worded as I thought my legislation was in title and content, I still met really great arguments against it because of the ideology involved. And I'll tell you what they were so that you understand. I think some of the triggers that can happen. One of the bills that I ran had to do with defining more detailed language that deals with young people in homelessness. And it turns out that there are a lot of safeguards, and the state law does describe the funding and the agencies and the system for making sure people who are minors get the support that they need if they become homeless. What's going on now, and I know this more because I've been a teacher for 32 years, and I've taught these kids, they turn into couch surfers. They are homeless technically, but they don't feel homeless because they're floating around from one friend's home to another, and it's couch surfing. They're not feeling distressed, they're not feeling homeless, but they are. And by law, their parents are obligated to be taking care of them. So that's the clarification that my bill was intending to do. The other part of the details in that legislation, that proposed legislation, was to specify some of the conditions under which these youth become homeless, because those are the things that sometimes parents are saying, I don't have to deal with this kid. If he chooses to leave, good, because we don't want to have LGBT in our household. We don't want to have arguments about religion. We don't want to have drugs and alcohol going on. We don't want friends, particular friends that my young person has become involved with. And so that's the conversation points, those are the conversation points that actually did go into the committee. Everyone in the committee that heard this bill encouraged me to keep it going, but they would not pass it out of committee. It was tabled, and it will run again this year. One of the key words in that legislation that caused it to become a questionable piece was the terminology around LGBT. So the legislation, the idea came to me from a DCFS worker who has encountered these youth and encountered them, and when they've said, I can't go home, my parents have kicked me out because I've identified as LGBT. So that's how it came to me. The people in the legislature who were on the committee to hear that bill, typically they're lawyers in that they interpreted that bill was being initiated, had been initiated by Equality Utah. And that's where the ideology came in. They literally did not want to address that legislation if it was going to have been initiated or even sponsored or identified with Equality Utah. It wasn't until I had the opportunity in the committee hearing to explain to them that it was initiated through a DCFS worker and a teacher, I believe at East High School, who read a paper from a homeless youth about this whole circumstance of being homeless and finally realizing that they were homeless. So that was the legislation. And again, where it met the ideology is just that one word. I was in that committee hearing for over an hour presenting that bill. And again, it got tabled, but with encouragement to continue. That's the kind of process that happens. This happened during the session. It was extraordinary for me to have that much time to present, because I've seen bills get pushed with the time frame in a committee to have very few minutes for presentation. And just as Patrice was saying, this is such a great time to contact legislators if you understand an issue or are aware of a bill or aware of a situation that you want a legislator to have an opportunity to study and address and discuss for research with the incredible team of attorneys that we have supporting and actually creating the language for the legislation that we work with. Really quickly, another bill that also had one of those trigger words in it was about charter schools, but not charter schools in terms of their education or who they are. It was identification. And the bill literally was to call for every charter school to have a web page in which they identify themselves in a list of 15 categories. I think it was 15 something, 12, 15, just so people could look at that charter school and compare it with others. In my district, I met many, many people who did or did not send their kids to charter schools, but they hadn't really investigated. And if I asked them why they were sending their kids to charter schools, I got answers, everything from, oh, I'm so excited, my grandson is learning cursive writing in 2nd grade. And then I didn't want to argue. I don't argue over points like that, but as a teacher, I realize children are typically not developed enough in their muscular coordination to be practicing to do cursive writing in 2nd grade. And this grandmother hadn't realized that, but she was really excited. Others have heard this or that or other information from neighbors about charter schools, and that's where the idea came from. Again, back to ideology, that we can meet in committees and on the floor. This bill was opposed by an organization called the Charter School Association. The Charter School Association talked to every single person on the Education Committee and advised them to definitely vote that bill down. And so it was not passed out of committee because it was considered by the Charter School Association as an anti-charter school bill, and the committee voted it down. The Charter School Board was excited about the bill. Other legislators who were not on the committee thought it sounded like a great idea. And this is where, if constituents from other districts had been aware of that bill, they might have called their legislator to support the idea of more information about particular schools going out. And I'm explaining these pieces of legislation because these are the kinds of things that happen where legislation doesn't pass, even though it seems like it's not ideology-based, it's education, it's information, it's supporting kids. It was an interesting process to see those. So both of those bills are going up again with some more experience on my part to inform other legislators, particularly the people on the committees, and inform the people in my district and inform other people through the media to help those ideas get passed into law.
Liz, thank you. Okay, everyone. Representative Dan McKay has joined us. He represents the Riverton area, the southwest corner of Salt Lake County, District 41, appointed to the legislature by Governor Herbert back in January of 2012. He has been the sponsor of at least 22 bills that have passed the legislature. He's served in the past on the Education and Government Operations Committees, works very closely with Speaker Greg Hughes, and let's see, married and the father of 6 kids?
That's right.
That's right. And so you've got 5 to 10 minutes, if you like.
Okay. Well, you all are very gracious. Thank you for inviting me out here, Dr. Chambliss, and I appreciate it. I can't sit down and talk, and so I'm just going to stand. But leave it to the Republican to always be late to a barbecue, right? So it's dangerous for me to come up into this neighborhood. I know that it's a little bit sketchy, you know. Actually, what's really dangerous has absolutely nothing to do with the politics up here on the east side, has everything to do with the fact that if I drive by Banbury Cross, I must stop. I don't have any agency or ability to stop myself from picking up a rainbow sprinkled donut. So yes, my donut tastes are stuck at 12-year-old as well. So I've been in the legislature. I was elected via a special replacement election in January 2012 to replace Representative Carl Wimmer, who stepped down to run for U.S. Congress in 2012. and was unsuccessful in his bid, but it has been a great opportunity for me to serve in the legislature and to serve you in the state. Is anyone here from Riverton, Bluffdale, or Harriman? Oh, great. Hey, it's my favorite constituents back there. So the Blisses are actually some of my favorite people, but she's one of the few brave Democrats who actually decided to run against me, and she worked her guts out and ran a very honorable campaign, and honestly, I couldn't have had a better person. Some of my favorite people, I have been involved in politics for a long time and run a lot of campaigns myself. I've also been a candidate several times. And I have found, and maybe this says more about me than anything else I can tell you, I have found that those who have been my opponents on the ballot have become some of my best friends in life, or people whose opinion I hold in high regard, and certainly the Blisses are in that category, so thank you. Even though I have murdered Solar and several other things that he's been after me for, so anyway. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else I could tell you that might be informative about being on the Republican side of the legislature. I have been, I think I was surprised, actually Dr. Chambliss told me I'd passed 22 bills. I honestly had never added that up before, so now I'm gonna have to start adding some notches, I guess, somewhere to keep track of that. Patrice, how many bills have you passed? Do you know? 70 something. So I think you can talk about. Of course, you've been in the legislature longer than me, so I'll work on that. But
it's a little harder for a Democrat. Just a little.
Well, and while it may be harder, I think it does speak to the strength of Patrice's abilities in the legislature. She's a very accomplished legislator, and a good example for all of us actually to follow as statesmanship goes. Being a Democrat and being a sparse minority in the Utah House of Representatives and passing 70 bills of substantive legislative policy is pretty amazing, really, when you think about that. When you compare that to the effectivity of even other states that have, reverse majorities or even close majorities, one way or the other. So I think that does speak to the collegiality of the Utah legislature and how different, I think, despite the overwhelming Republican presence, the ability, I think, for Democrats to be very effective, I think, in the legislature. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else I think you might want to know. I'm a father. That's the most important responsibility I have in life. I have 6 children, and I apologize for being late this morning. I appreciate your understanding. I just had a lot of things going on, and I made a goal a couple of months ago to be more present on the weekends. That's the family's time. And one of the hard parts about being in the legislature is it will take as much time as you allow it. It's just like any other hobby or whatever it might be in your life. It will take exactly as much time as you allow it. And I could take phone calls, I could deal with constituent matters, I could check out, honestly, on the rest of my life and spend all kinds of time doing and working on those types of legislative policy matters. We could go to a meeting, a lunch, or some kind of informative policy conversation every night of the week, or every lunchtime and every breakfast time. The legislative session is just as difficult. And so when you think about those things, I made a goal, and this really turned out unfortunately for you guys this morning, or maybe fortunately, you got to hear from Elizabeth. I made a goal to be more present, and so my phone has been parked on my nightstand for the last few hours, and I was just lucky enough for my Fitbit to vibrate, and so I heard Patrice and Arent's desperate call for me to show up this morning. So, okay, I think I've been thinking a little bit. I actually read an article this morning, and it seemed fitting for this morning, and the fact that we're in a church, it certainly helped as well. One of the things I thought about, people say, well, the partisan divide is tearing this country and this world apart. Have you guys heard that or felt that story type thing? Okay, good. I'm not alone, and I thought that was the case until I actually read something that kind of changed my mind a little bit this morning. this gentleman was complaining about his right-wing, crazy nut job father, and went on to tell all these terrible things that his father was because he was a right-wing nutter, like me. This advice columnist was responding and saying, well, perhaps the problem isn't with his politics, perhaps the problem is with you, as it is with all of us frequently, right? That we've gotten past the idea that the other person might have a point, or there might be understanding somewhere in the middle. We've gotten past that, or we're forgetting that. And I thought one of the most apropos quotes in this article was, the right and the left, they're not tearing the world apart, they're not destroying the country, they're not destroying the world, etc. What is destroying the world is the fact that the right and the left can't talk to each other anymore and can't find common ground and can't work together towards common solutions. And the inability for either side to recognize the humanity in the other, I think, is what could and can tear us apart if we don't find that. So anyways, for that, I'll turn the rest of my time back over to you for questions and answers. But I do hold in high regard my colleagues here in the front stand, and even though at times we're on different sides of a vote, one way or the other, I will say that I am very proud of the service that they offer you in the state of Utah. And so for that, I say thank you, Dr. Chandler.
Thank you. We have about half an hour for questions and answers, and we're going to start here. I'm going to alternate back and forth. Please nod to me or show of hands. Okay?
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
It's so good to see you. A couple of years ago when I was running against you and I was knocking on doors, I met a really interesting young father. He was probably in his 30s. And the first thing he told me was that he doesn't vote. And he doesn't believe he can be represented in this state or in this country. And we talked about that, and he was actually a graduate of BYU in political science. And I was just floored. But he felt like because of the Electoral College, and because of the fact that he lived in a Republican state, he wouldn't be able to, have any effect in the national elections, but also in the state elections because of the gerrymandering. He felt like he wasn't just underrepresented, but just completely not represented. He also talked about his professors at BYU who were Mormon like he was, and who were Democrat like he was. But he was just so disillusioned, and I thought, what can we do about these young people who, they are our future, who have no hope for being represented in this country? So my question is, how do you feel about the Electoral College, gerrymandering, getting young people involved?
Well, there goes your half hour.
And I want to chime into this one too, so there you go. Okay.
No, why don't you start, Patrice, and then I'll jump.
I meet a lot of people who are just totally unwilling to participate, and I meet them at rallies now. They're coming to rallies and they tell me they didn't vote. I actually think this year, because of what is going on in Washington, we will see more people understand that their vote matters. And certainly in the state legislature, it matters. When I first ran, I ran in a district that I don't represent now. It was farther south, and people just looked at me like, no Democrat represents this area, no Democrat represents an area near there. You're not from the area. I didn't know what a community council was. I didn't have my kids in the local schools. They were young. In fact, I was nursing my son to keep him quiet during the fundraising phone calls, and I was the wrong religion, the wrong this, the wrong that. But people came together and helped me. And I won by just a very small amount, and everybody helping made a difference. And so I try to explain to young people that, last year we lost a race by 5 votes in a race that had between 17 and 18,000 votes. And it was a very remarkable race, and I'm sure we'll see that one again. So I think their vote counts. In terms of gerrymandering, I have said this, I've been on the redistricting committee, I've said this for so many years, but voters need to pick legislators. Legislators should not pick voters, and the districts are so crazy. If you look at what is going on right now in the race for the 3rd Congressional District to replace Congressman Chaffetz, there's an area in the Cove that's divided on streets that are about as wide as this aisle, Chandra and Idlewild and all these little streets that go like this, and it makes no sense. They could have legally gone right down Wasatch Boulevard And it would make sense to people. I live on this side of the street or that side of a major street. But the gerrymandering, not only is it confusing to people, it makes it hard for them to be involved in the community. The people who were represented by Congressman Chaffetz lived on the Arizona border, and they lived in the Cove. Doesn't make sense to me at all. So, you know, I mean, this is a long, long topic. As we know, redistricting is an issue that we may have an initiative on. Ultimately, the Utah Legislature constitutionally will draw the lines. But to have a redistricting commission that is not a partisan group, that is at least making recommendations that make sense, I think, from my perspective, is a good idea.
Again, I can't sit down. I'm just too
I need
antsy.
to
So,
stand up for you.
see, it just shows she's a statesman, right? She's willing to sit there patiently, and I can't do it. So, I think I don't know how to help people that don't vote. You know, I'm growing empathetic for those who feel disaffected or don't feel interested in voting. I was equally, how do I say it? I'm being recorded, so it makes it somewhat different. But for me, I was not thrilled about the outcome of the presidential election. I wasn't thrilled. My party won, which is fine. But the next morning I saw more divide and not more unity. There wasn't strength in coming together after an election and some of those things. And so I just question the Electoral College. I worry that we have gotten away from, or we now have, and you guys see this on a regular basis. You guys have been here in Utah a long time with me. We're a flyover state, and no one really pays attention during the presidential elections to Utah or to where it goes. So if I step back and say, well, how do I feel about the Electoral College? I would like for Utah to be more relevant in the presidential conversation because I think there are some relevant cultural perspectives here in Utah, especially how we represent the West, that I think are missed in the presidential conversation. That being said, you look at the effects of Ohio, you look at Florida, you look at the states that, quote, matter in the electoral process right now, and what I argue is borderline federal corruption, where you've got, and it doesn't matter the party, this happens both parties. They both make presidential promises as they visit these states and dole out the goodies after the election so that the following four-year election, that it's their turn again to give more goodies and to make more promises. If you look at farm subsidies, you go down the list of all the things that happen as a result of our presidential election being swung only by those swing states, makes it somewhat difficult. So I wonder about how much longer our constitutional republic can exist with the Electoral College. I don't know. And even you heard President Trump say that he would like to see the Electoral College go away and it be more of a popular vote. But he said that wasn't the election he was given, and so as a result, he went and did it. And everybody says, well, he lost the popular vote. Why would he want that? And he says, well, and those of you who are around politics and a venue for another day, a popular vote election causes more insular politics sometimes. The Republicans focus on getting Republican votes and spend money in Republican areas to try and get more Republicans to show up, and then end up not spending money in states where it's more costly to get Republican votes. So there's a thought that they would, they'd spend a lot of money in Utah, they'd spend a lot of money in, Democrats spend a lot more money in Oregon and some of these things where they could pick up votes for cheaper. The media markets are cheaper, et cetera, and those kinds of things. It's the same problem, so different issue. So that's Electoral College, brief thinking.
Question right here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the three of you voted on the relocation of the prison. I was adamantly opposed to that relocation and still am. And especially since it seems like a lot of the donations to the legislators come from the real estate area, and that a lot of the people in the legislature have jobs that are in the real estate area. Can the three of you or any one of you comment on why it's being relocated, why that's a good idea? I'd love to understand why the legislature supported that.
You want me to? I'll own it. Why not? So the thought was, and this is an economic argument as much as it is anything else, and I have to disclose, I'm a real estate professional. I've owned a real estate development company for years, and it's what I do in addition to my other responsibilities. I say retired's not the right word, but I retired a few years ago and went to work for, from actual full-time development, and went to work for the LDS Church. The LDS Church has an investment real estate portfolio, and they asked me to come over and help run the investment real estate portfolio for the church. So I've been doing that for, I guess, 9 years now. So that being said, the prison is an economic question. If you're going to rebuild a prison and where it's going to be located, and you start from scratch and you decide just today, blank palette, where should it be? And I don't think anybody, well, I don't think anybody. There are many people who believe that you wouldn't site it in Draper on the point of the mountain. You wouldn't site it. There are a bunch of places you wouldn't site it. You wouldn't site it in West Jordan. You wouldn't site it up here, you know, do away with Hogle Zoo and put it there either. There's a lot of places you wouldn't put it, right? Because it just doesn't make sense, path of growth and some of those other issues. But you can look at potential unwanted ground, and you can look at places that are difficult to develop, and you can say, well, because it's not going to have a lot of neighbors, or the neighbors that are going to go there are, you know, are complementary uses and unlikely to be residential, you can put it there. And that's where I think that's how the site by the airport percolated to the top, was because it wasn't particularly habitable. You know, and in my other life as working for the church, they owned a bunch of real estate up there north of I-80, and Salt Lake City had made it clear that they didn't want residential development up there for lots of reasons. And so the prison kind of ended that direction because it was in a place of, there are no other neighbors, it's less desirable, etc. But if the decision was made that we were going to build a new prison, which based on our aging facilities, it was decided that we were going to build a new prison. All of the local and state experts, and also those who had toured it nationally, had toured and said, yeah, it's time for us to stop focusing on, you know, we have a record high recidivism rate in the state because we focused on incarceration instead of rehabilitation. And so building new facilities, if we can take some of that money and instead of focusing on incarceration, and instead focus on revitalization and rehabilitation, which is what we hope the new facility will accomplish. So once you make that decision, then it became where. And granted, no one was going to ever love where it's at. Fortunately, it's not in any of our backyards. None of us live right there, and I don't see anyone necessarily living there soon. It's north of I-80, you know, come on, you don't live by I-80.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I mean, I'm saying right next to the airport.
No, I'll tell you where I live.
I know where you live.
And I actually have other concerns, and they are the air quality concerns and the water quality concerns, and there are other concerns with the current site. I understand that it's not a neighborhood, but there are other issues. And I'm going to let Liz make a few comments because it certainly has an impact on her area.
So my immediate neighborhood where I actually live is 6900 West, which if you go west from there on 7200 West is directly south of the address where the new prison is supposed to be located. It's not that, you know, it's not my backyard issue. My area is actually looking at the potential for economic growth because of support systems around a prison, and we are looking at the opportunities to provide a different kind of incarceration that actually helps people become unincarcerated. So we like that about that location. There's still a lot of concern about the environmental impact. That's actually still being regarded, researched, and that's, the last I heard that there has been some postponement with the relocation of the prison.
So just the soil issues and things like that, we brought in more fill. You know, for those of you who care, there's more fill being brought to the site to help, you know, help it meet compaction levels. Any engineers in the audience? No, good. I don't want to offend them with my rudimentary understanding of compaction levels or requirements. But prison walls are very heavy, and we'd like them to stay high as we built them. So as a result, we must put fill underneath them to keep them high. So that's, I think that's the hope. But I voted for it, and given the same information today that I had then and where we are today, I would vote for the same. But I know because of that answer, Tim's going to give me a head nod that I get a 30-second head start right at the end of the meeting so I can avoid being tossed out. But Patrice, you voted against it, right?
You're not getting out of here so fast. But thank you for carving out personal time to be with this rather hostile audience this morning.
There's nothing hostile.
I was interested and very excited to hear you say that you're disappointed about the divide that remains after President Trump was elected and the fact that he is not inspiring any collegiality, nor does there seem to be any. You addressed specifically that we can't talk to each other. My question is, do you have any feelings about the Citizens United decision and the resultant dark money and huge amounts of money that are coming in and that seems to be a decision the Republicans celebrate and the Democrats hate? Could you comment on that and how you feel?
Yeah, so for those of you who are really, really interested, I read this book back in my undergraduate because sick leave was really interested in it, but it's a book by crazy liberal Charles Lessig. It's called Republic Lost, and it's basically some statistical research and information with a relationship to the amount of money in politics and its relationship to the bills and those kinds of things that are passed, specifically in Congress, but I think there's an analogy for local legislatures as well, because I'm not going to lie to you and say that people's donations don't factor into certain people's decision making. What I will say though is with Citizens United, it created this dark money concept, that kind of deal. What we have seen, and this is, many of you are old enough with me for having thermometers filled with mercury. Everybody remember? Right? I see the guy with two heads back there nodding yes. Okay. So, I'm just kidding. So there's nobody with two heads in case anybody's wondering back there. So, but anybody remember when you have the mercury thermometer break on the ground? And how fun it was to try and scoop it all up back into the little deal? That was toxic, right? It's a terrible idea now. You tell people about it, it's just ridiculous. But I remember we broke a few as a kid, and the mercury was on the ground, and it went everywhere. And it was my job after I broke it, my mom would say, well, you go clean it up. Terrible thing for a parent to do now. It's like child abuse. But my mom's passed on, so it's past the statute of limitations. But I remember scooping up this mercury, and it would go everywhere, and it didn't seem to matter how much I tried to gather it or scoop it or do whatever. It just went everywhere. And this is what I'm learning about politics and money specifically in politics. It doesn't really seem to matter what rule we pass, what law we change, or what transparency there is. You cannot fix the ill motives of those involved in the process. You can't. Human beings are self-interested. We all are. I wish I could wave a magic wand and none of us be self-interested, but that'd be a totally different story. We all chase our own self-interest. That being said, and since that is a core problem in human nature, it's a core problem in politics. You are stuck with the people you elect, who's self-interested there, whether it be to keep office, whether it be to, overthrow the government, whatever it may be. You are stuck with their motives. You are stuck with those who have who are interested in the process and, throw their money at it, whatever it may be. And the only way I think to fix it, it's transparency. As long as people, know where the money's coming from. I would encourage people. I asked the lieutenant governor during my last election to go in and and to track how many people checked my financial disclosures during my last election. Guess how many hits there were on my financial disclosures? 3. I know 2 of them were me. right? So what that will tell you is, while we complain about dark money, and while we complain about where it's at, it is difficult to capture, and it doesn't matter what rule we pass to try and change it. The game is always going to be played. The game Monopoly doesn't change just because you change one of the rules. It's still Monopoly. And what I have found to be true about that in politics is the key is electing people with impeccable credibility and impeccable integrity. Don't judge political people by where their money comes from. Judge them by how they vote. Judge them by whether or not they show up to inconvenient Sunday meetings and are willing to face their constituents and talk about bills and issues. Judge them by their character and those things. But by all means, the money aspect of it has got to start becoming secondary. I don't know, if you go and read this book, Charles Lessig, I don't know how to do that. He has some ideas in there that I think are problematic, like caps on spending, like the government actually, just providing your campaign funds, and that's abhorrent to me. So anyways, all of those things I think I've spoken too long. Patrice?
I have serious concerns with Citizens United, the idea that corporations can, as we all know, make these unlimited contributions. But I also want you to focus on Utah. Utah is one of the few states that has no limits on contributions. You could all write us a $10 million check. No, I don't take $10 million.
I will.
You're right.
10 mil.
Right. But there are no limits in the state, and we are one of the very few. And I just think that's wrong. I've been watching with just disgust at this negative campaigning being done by these outside groups on the local races, and it really, really is not right. It bothers me. We have to change this, and I am not happy with what's happened and what continues to get worse after Citizens United.
Question right here.
Wow, that just blows me away. I did not know that there were no limits on contributions. My question, though, is for Representative McKay. You had mentioned a solar bill. Could you tell us about that solar bill and why you voted against it, why you were opposed to it? Thank you.
Well, there have been several. And so I remember, I think the bill that Rick was specifically frustrated with me about was the state subsidy for solar. I think it's a, what is it, amount, but as a tax credit that you get for solar. And it isn't so much that the tax credit itself is wrong. It's that the difficulty is picking which tax credits stay and which ones don't, which ones are effective and which ones are not. When the tax credit, and this is the tax policy wonk in mind, is you use tax credits to try and incentivize behavior as it ramps up, and once it catches on and has its own momentum, do is appropriately step back from that tax credit and let the momentum continue on its own so that we don't continue to subsidize an industry that doesn't need subsidy. And so the solar bill, at least the tax credit issue, was that. And for that bill, taking that subsidy away, it doesn't disappear until 2021. And I think it's a phase out, a couple $100 here or there over the next few years until we get to that complete phase out. But solar is getting ubiquitous in its adoption that it doesn't need necessarily the state incentive. And we've looked at some economic studies that show that exact mantra, that those kinds of things are becoming more sustainable on their own. So and I recognize there is a need for our clean air issues to continue to have solar. I'm getting it installed in my new house, and there are others who are doing the same thing. And for that purpose. So I think you still need to be responsible. I don't think we're doing anything about that. But it's an income tax credit, and so the problem is that's $2,500 per new solar installation that doesn't go into our schools.
I'd like to hear your response to why can't Utahns have a universal background check for all gun sales like many other states? And is Utah a better community because of the gun show loophole that allows rapists, abusers, just about anybody to buy a gun with no questions asked? If you think that's a loaded question, it was meant to be.
Perfect, perfect. And I'm going to just comment. My uncle for many years owned a pawn shop. And if you went in to buy a gun there, you had to go through a background check. And it was always frustrating for him to see when somebody went to a gun show, somebody he couldn't sell a gun to could just go there and get it. And it isn't right. It really is not right. I couldn't agree with you more. It's a ridiculous loophole. We ought to close it. That being said, when you talk about strong lobbies and people being concerned up at the Capitol, there is one. It's an issue that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you're hard-pressed to find anybody who's willing to help out on this issue, from my perspective, because I don't think it's fair. If one person has to do a background check, if one business has to do, why should we be hurting our local businesses? Doesn't make sense to me. Why should they have to go through that process and not sell the gun and then have the person go buy the gun at the gun show or other places? So I agree with you.
I like her answer.
I'll be watching for that vote.
So it's my strong applause for today. The hard part for me is I wasn't around when the gun laws were written, and I still, that bill's never made it to the floor, so I haven't really made a decision about how it ought to be done. I'll say this: we have to do something about our mental health issues that we have in this country. And, I'm not punting per se, but I want you to understand that there is a sensitivity on the right, especially, that when granting rights, the rights that we say that the government gives us really aren't given to us by the government. The right for self-protection, the right for self-determination, the right for pursuit of happiness, all those things, they aren't given to us by government. Government's main job is to draw boundaries around and protect those rights from being impinged. But it's not government's job to necessarily, pass laws or change laws to impact those rights. So the gun show exception specifically, I can honestly say that a pawn shop owner and gun shop owners, I don't see a reason for them to be treated differently. But you're not going to like where I go next. I don't know that the pawn shop owner should be doing the same background check either. So I recognize it's popular. But at the end of the day, I believe that you got to understand where I believe these rights come from. It's not from the government. Those rights, and I think that's an important element for you to understand, at least about where I come from. The government doesn't give those things, and the government in that respect shouldn't be taking them away. And it does lead to some terrible results. Every time there is a gun violence death for one reason or another, it is horrible. And we all suffer as a society every time it happens, and we suffer together. So I don't want to take anything away from that, but just recognize where I believe the rights come from. They're an inalienable right that's given to us from on high.
The government's responsibility to provide a secure environment, why do we have a youth military?
Yeah, and I understand that argument, and I don't disagree that there is a balance between security and liberty, no doubt. And that security and liberty is something that I think we have to be careful with. So.
Well, I had decided this question before, although I certainly do think that the government needs to support safety and freedom from being killed. My question, though, was based on what Colleen said to begin with. We sort of got off into the national government and Ohio and all that. What chance is there for redistricting to be supported by both parties? I read in the Tribune that there is Republican support for redistricting Utah. Let's don't get off in Ohio anymore. What is the chance for that?
Sorry, I cut myself short earlier because I didn't think you wanted to hear from me all morning. But Tim, don't forget, I get a head nod with a 30-second head start to the parking lot, right?
Well, 3 or 4 seconds, maybe.
Hey, 3 or 4, I'm down to 3 or 4. Great, lovely. I'm not packing this morning, so I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm kidding. So your question about redistricting in Utah, I could be wrong. Patrice would know this better than I would. I wasn't here the last time we redistricted. But the redistricting as it was passed with bipartisan support. The maps as we did them were passed with bipartisan support. They were.
There were some votes, yes.
Yeah. So granted some, right? And I'm not saying, which means, and again,
Could have been the school board.
yeah, I'll tell you what happens, and I'll spare Patrice this, right? What happens is Republican leadership goes to a member of Democratic leadership, and there is some horse trading that goes on, and as a result of that horse trading, Democratic leadership will vote in support of the maps so that we can say that there's bipartisanship. Okay? I'll just cleanly say that's what happens up on the Hill. We don't love it. It's part of the sausage making that we're not all proud of all the time. But I'll say this. I think that this next redistricting process, I think we are going to be focused on, fairness and some of those things. There is this difficulty that, if you say, anybody that says, well, the Democrat part of the state should have its own seat, and the Republican parts should have its own seats, so that we're roughly proportional. What I will argue is, you are just making the exact same argument, which is that we should be drawing these along partisan lines one way or the other. That's all I'm saying. And what everyone who argues with me says, well, I'm just choosing a different partisanship. I get it. The problem is, once you choose partisanship, you are stuck with it. And it is an across-the-line problem that I think will not have a short solution, and it doesn't have any short solutions because while Utah does, someone claims we gerrymander or whatever it may be, and I hate that term. It came out of a 1961 Baker versus Carr. If you talk to Chief Justice Earl Warren, famous Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and you ask him what the hardest case was for during his judicial service in the Supreme Court, guess what case he said? Baker versus Carr. And everybody's like, what the heck? What case? It was a Tennessee redistricting case. They hadn't redistricted for 60 years because they liked the rural influence, the Republican rural influence, over the growing and dominating urban influence. And the Supreme Court forced them to redistrict and do a bunch of things for that deal. So back to Utah. I don't know. Candidly, Patrice, you've been here before, so I look forward to hearing what you think we might pull off.
I can remember my first redistricting, and Summit County came to the committee and said, I was on the committee, and said, we are just exactly the size for one House seat. Why don't we draw a line that's about the county lines? That would make a lot of sense. It really would have made a lot of sense. But no, that wouldn't work because heaven forbid it might have gone Democratic and we had to divide it up and throw in a bunch of rural, so that wouldn't happen. I look at Salt Lake City and the Salt Lake County and how it's so divided up. I really have concerns with this. It's true, whatever lines you draw have consequences, and that's why we ought not to be drawing the lines. Because I've heard from people that said, oh yeah, I want to bring in that neighborhood. Grandma so-and-so is there. Or I want to cut out that neighborhood because my potential opponent is there. There's just too many vested interests, particularly from legislators who want to maintain their own seats. Because they go into it, and we certainly wouldn't want to cut so-and-so out because we all like them. So we just should not be part of the process. That's the ideal. Is that going to happen? Probably not. Now, I happen to think that if the redistricting initiative, which creates an advisory committee, gets onto the ballot and passes with overwhelming support, which I believe it would, then they will put together a commission and they will draw maps. They will present those maps to the legislature. I think it's going to be a lot harder for the legislature to ignore those maps like they have many of the maps that have come from the public if those come from this commission that has overwhelming public support. That is my hope, Because the Utah Constitution only says one thing about redistricting, and it says the Utah Legislature shall do it. And the only way to change the Constitution is a vote of 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and then it goes to the ballot. Now, if it went to the ballot, we could change it, but do you think it's likely 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate are going to change the redistricting process? And that there lies, and there is the problem for us. So I really hope we can see some changes. I want lines that make sense to people. I want some sort of communities of interest. Other states are able to do it. Not all of them, but many of them have a lot of them are creating these nonpartisan or bipartisan commissions. And I'm hopeful, but I've always been one that's been, the glass is half full. I'm a Utah Democrat.
I'm going to really quickly address this. The initiative to address the redistricting is one of the initiatives that I'm really excited about, just because it involves and invites the populace to participate. People I talk to in my neighborhoods, things like gerrymandering and the other initiatives that are approaching, those are the exact kinds of issues that have caused them to just throw up their hands and say, I don't understand. I want to trust my government to represent me and my interests. It seems like they're not. This initiative is what I feel we need. They're saying that as well as I am, in order to feel like they're actually being invited to participate and being listened to in the process. Because there are so many things that I talk to people in my district about where they just feel are unfair, they're uninvited, they're not engaged because of that. And in my neighborhood, and I live in a townhome community, so we've got the white fence around the whole community. The west 10 buildings inside that fence are in a different legislative district. People can't understand that, and I think they look to our representation in their government to make it more sensible to them. And there's a way to do that. It isn't sensible to have lines drawn the way they are. And the input with the commission would help them see that if the commission would actually be followed by the legislators. And that's where...
And we forgot to answer one of your questions. You asked about bipartisan support. The two co-chairs of this, one of them is Jeff Wright, a Republican who ran for Congress, who just retired from the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission. The other one is Ralph Becker, the former mayor of Salt Lake City. And we know from Professor Chambliss's example that Salt Lake County has done this. Salt Lake County has a redistricting commission that draws the lines. They do this without the politicians being involved, and I think it makes a lot more sense.
It is after 11:20. Let's express appreciation to our guest.